Hello and welcome to the Cities People Love to Live in podcast from Schwendinger, a platform for sharing ideas, experiences and great conversation. I'm France Lathouwers and this is the first in a series of discussion on the role lighting can play in building cities that deliver a better future. With more than half of the world population currently lives in urban areas, people want to live, work and play in safe, welcoming and attractive spaces. What does that mean for mayors, city planners, architects and utilities? How can lighting infrastructure make a city more responsive to its citizens' needs? Today I'm delighted to be joined by Leni Schwendinger and Nicolas Keutgen to discuss how investing in smart street light makes sense. First, let me introduce Leni Schwendinger and Nicolas Keutgen. Leni Schwendinger is a published authority on issues of city illumination. She specializes in strategic urban lighting, public art and community engagement. Collaborating with municipalities, her innovative projects help to transform public spaces after dark. The recently published Smart City Street Lighting Guidebook for the States of New York was authored by International Nighttime Design Initiative, of which she is founder. Leni is also a visiting research fellow at the London School of Economics. Nicolas is CIO of Schwendinger. He has extensive experience in lighting, initially managing Schwendinger's subsidiary in Hungary, before moving to Sao Paulo, where he headed up the group's South American region. In 2016, he relocated to Brussels to head up Schwendinger's research and developments, before founding Schwendinger Hyperion, Schwendinger's Smart City Center of Excellence in Portugal last year. Passionate about sustainability and the environment, Nicolas believes in the potential of technology to transform towns and cities in the 21st century. So let's get started. What exactly is a smart street light? Leni, do you want to go first?
I am in New York City. I live part-time in London. So I come from a US perspective. I just wanted to say that, with an awareness of the global lighting community. So many of my answers will be from my in-depth experience and research in the US, as well as other places.
And I'm based actually in Portugal, in Lisbon. And I've less of a US perspective and more of a European, South American perspective. And I think it's going to be really a pleasure to discuss with you about the differences that we also can find in these different geographical areas, because I think smart cities and smart streetlights are not just something which is, unique and that fits, I would say, in all different geographical areas around the world.
Yes, I'd like to follow on that by saying it's not in the sense ubiquitous. The market is ubiquitous, but let us talk about how important each locale, each city is to the meaning of nighttime, the activities of nighttime. So when we talk about smart street lighting, which is a flexible kind of lighting, an interconnected and a networked lighting, this isn't one size fits all. This is a workable technology, but I think where the creativity and the functionality fits in is how we fit it to each city. What do you think, Nicolas?
No, I absolutely agree with this, and if I look more on the technological aspect of it, it allows obviously to connect the lighting, to monitor, I would say, energy consumption and the status, to dim the lighting, to tune the lighting to different color temperatures, which also allows, I would say, maybe a more citizen perspective and perspective closer to also the environment in which the lighting is set up. I think smart street light will bring, compared to traditional street lights, besides all the more economical aspects of reduction of energy consumption or longer lifetime or reduce maintenance costs, will really bring a better quality of light, and using lighting, as I said, in a citizen perspective. But I think on that aspect, you have much more experience on how to bring, I would say, the citizen perspective within designing the light in urban environment.
Yep. So I think I'd like to go back to France's question, which is what is a smart street light? Because you have now mentioned, the many aspects of the light pole as an armature, or as a armature is really the word, but real estate to connect
infrastructure.
And the infrastructure, to connect those many sensors that are more, let us parse this, as smart city devices. So in a way, this street light has the lighting component, which are our lighting design listeners and those who would like to understand lighting better, is separate from, in a sense, but provides the ability or the infrastructure to the sensors that help cities determine the quality of their environmental situation, determine circulation, traffic, all the wonderful things we want to measure, and then streamline city services. But these two things, I like to say, are a little bit distinct, the light and the pole.
Indeed. And what I would add towards this is that the smart street light is a phenomenon that we see emerging. And although is a lot talked about, we don't see it very much, I would say, implemented at this stage. And I think it gives the opportunity also of a collaboration between lighting designers and manufacturers, for instance, on establishing a new way of creating this lighting master plans, or creating, I would say, these atmospheres that we are looking into the city. So the technology is really there at the service, I would say, of the citizens, to bring something different or something new or something better, maybe, in our cities.
Right. So that takes us. I'm really glad you brought up the point about the designer and the manufacturer and how we might explore new methodologies. I think a lot of manufacturers, and it sounds like it's not the case with Schwendinger, don't think so much about the process of getting to the lighting design. And now it's even more complicated with the smart technologies. So, it's sky's the limit. I want to focus on this relationship that we can have to strengthen the envisioning process. An envisioning process, pre-design with citizens. And I'm curious how, I have some ideas, but how can manufacturers and designers strengthen that process? Because guess what? It's not that normal. We're inventing envisioning process for smart cities. Why not? It's we need it. And would that be through pilots, or would that be, how can we together engage our local community? Let's say we're talking about a particular city or a precinct in that city. We want to find out what the problems are, what we're solving, but also how we can be creative. How do you think, it's a new world. So I'm just asking you to think, what can manufacturers do to support the citizen engagement and envisioning?
Well, I think there is for sure different roles to be established in this process. And I think there is a question also of authority and credibility that lighting designers or planners, I would say, can bring with them. And I think this first part that you mentioned of, I would call it maybe the discovery, the discovery of the uniqueness of a city or of a neighborhood, the discovery of the citizen needs, probably, and the citizen needs and desires of the opportunities and challenges maybe that the neighborhood or the city faces. I think that's a role that I think lighting designers and planners really have in their DNA.
I think that's a really good point. And and the discovery we call here in the States, we call that existing conditions survey.
Okay.
And most people don't think about it in terms of lighting. So existing conditions survey in our parlance and our request for proposals when they ask for a tender or a bid is usually counting light poles and taking photos of what light poles do we have. And for me, it's like, okay, probably we're going to replace light poles one for one because the trenching and the power is all set. Fine, let's find out where they're located. However, since smart lighting provides the opportunity of scenarios, transformable lighting, as you mentioned earlier, where we can tune the whites, where we could potentially, I want to see the light pole that's got some RGB in it as well, tune the color. And where we can, create a time-based software program that fits, as you said, the needs, but also the aspirations of the future. So that takes so let's have discovery first, and then let's have envisioning, because we need to say how things are now, what we're unhappy about, what we'd like to see is the envisioning. And so in that case, I just wondered, this is just like exploration, Nicolas. So, would manufacturers of the future be able to do some pilots or show even some demonstrations?
What we have participated lately in are what we could call living labs, which are very often, I would say, a part of a neighborhood with particular challenges that the cities has identified. They might be criminality, or they might be mobility, or there might be, let's say, different challenges. And where basically the city invites different manufacturers of different solutions to come and coexist together and to build, if you want, a small ecosystem. And I think this is what really in smart lighting and smart cities, this is what is getting very interesting. Instead of going into a pure competition discussion, we go into a cooperation discussion. We go into a conversation where one sensor can help an actuator, so a sensor can help a lighting, for instance, or I would say another sensor can lead to irrigation, or lighting can actually discourage some behaviors. And so, as you mentioned, it's different scenarios that we can build up in these kind of living labs. So I would say this is really, for us so far, the most effective way of showcasing and of testing what is happening in a scale that allows the citizen also to participate.
Leni, you recently went through this discovery and visioning process with the state of New York. How did you convince the state to go through this process? And what were your conclusions in terms of the relationship with citizens and with the public authorities?
Well, I have to say that we won a bid for this. So we did not convince them. We won a bid to do the guidebook. And our Governor Cuomo, has provided incentives. So it really started on the policy and economics of incentives for cities to basically, what we say, get a discount on smart lighting systems. So the Transportation Authority, which is also very important to check, because we are beginning to see lighting and transportation with urban design connecting quite a bit. So the State Transportation Committee, they're called, put out a request for proposals, and we won that with a planning group. And then we get to the convincing part. So what we wanted to do, we have a little bit International Nighttime Design Initiative, or NTD, Nighttime Design, has a very strong feeling that citizens should be involved. That is not true everywhere. You can just install lighting. You don't have to ask anyone what they think would be a good job. So since we have that as our basic tenet, we created a decision-making matrix, which was requested, that includes different ways of engaging citizens. And also we demonstrated how smart lighting might be different in different districts. So trying to explain, it becomes an educational and guidance and sort of technological expose in that sense, that we had to explain that, a residential area, the smart lighting program might be quite different than the center of town. The center district, clearly to us, we're experienced, we could have something a bit brighter, we can have, something exciting in the center district, and in the residential, we may want to dim the lights, we might want to turn them off. And then we had a third district, the institutional district, which is hospitals, schools, community center. They happen to be grouped, but in a lot of cities, they are grouped. Yeah. And, would there be some special lighting that might get brighter if there's an ambulance or an emergency, for the hospital? Or is there, when there's a late night community center event, might the lighting change? So, we've gotten lots of requests for the guidebook, and I'm very interested. Lots for the decision-making outline as well. I think, I read actually in a survey that making decisions about and educations about smart lighting is one of the top desires of cities in the US. It's just really hard to understand why to do it. We are thinking of, I'd like to bring up a subject that COVID-19 brings to bear, which is that nighttime outdoors has become an important place. And indeed, our key workers, or essential workers, as we call them here, many of them work the night shift. They have got to be out and about making deliveries, picking up rubbish, getting to the hospital because they're hospital workers, cleaning, many essential key workers that keep our cities going, that keep our quality of life as nice as it can be, as good as it can be, keep our cities running. They're working at night. What can we do from a lighting perspective to make life better? So in our discovery process, let's find out what that lighting is like, who is living there, and who is out at night, and what we can do to make a better night. Perhaps we need brighter lights at midnight when people go to work. It's counterintuitive, but we'll find out who is traversing these areas through what I like to call the shades of night. Minute by minute, hour by hour, who is on the streets because they have to be, as well as who is on the streets because they love to be. Those of us who walk at night, those of us who party or go to clubs, these are different needs. And I think what's so great about smart lighting is coalescing and dealing with these challenges.
You both mentioned pilot projects. How can they help cities?
I will say that the pilots and the idea of where we place the pilots is a quick win. So if we place pilots that are proving out certain situations, whether it's a warmer light here, or a light that blinks after midnight in the nightclub area to warn everyone it is midnight or 3 a.m, or a darker light because of a wildlife situation. If we're going to create exemplars or create the use cases in a test, in a pilot, where we place that, in which neighborhood could really, really help as a quick win to bring people to the table and say, yeah, now I see how this can help us.
One of the examples that we had in one of our living labs was actually the link between noise and light. And I think this is a very interesting. We had a very interesting case actually. It's a city in Belgium where basically the idea was to see if we could bring back some younger folks, I would say, to a square by installing some basketball infrastructure. But on the other side, obviously, there was the fear of the neighborhood, or particularly the people looking over this square, that youngsters would maybe aggregate there until God knows, 11, midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, maybe drinking. In Belgium, we have very good beer, drinking some beers, together and so on and so forth. And so the idea actually emerged to be capable of detecting noise and also the noise of the ball itself. So the light would actually go up when people would start to play. And then at a certain time, which is then decided by the city hall or eventually in discussion, conversation, I would say, with the neighborhood, the light would then start to dim lower and lower and lower to make it almost impossible afterwards to really play properly. And so I think there is in neighborhoods there is this aspect of noise that can be or positive. I would say in the case of bringing up, I would say light to enable a sports activity, but also that detection of noise that allows, I would say, to potentially reduce the fact that people start to agglomerate together at a certain time of the night.
If I could respond to this, I absolutely use basketball as a case study, and I use music and poetry as well. So I'm just quickly going to outline a scenario. I was working with our housing authority here, and it turned out that the basketball courts had lighting. And I thought, what a fantastic thing. You've got lighting at your basketball courts. That's great. And they said, basically, we don't turn it on. So I thought, and we didn't have the opportunity to test this yet, but I thought, since smart lighting on the lighting side is software, the smart part, let's do a living test. Let's try in this situation, turn on the basketball lighting for 1 hour on Friday nights for 3 weeks. Let's evaluate it. Let's observe. Let's see how that works. Then we come back together. It was horrible. It was fine. Let's say it was fine. Okay, how about 2 hours on Friday per week, which is similar to what you're saying. But basically, you're bringing the citizenry in, the locals, to say, does it or does it not work? And how can we deal with the basketball, the teenagers, etc. Now, my other point in the same test was, let's create a poetry corner in this courtyard we were discussing. Let us have some colored light that goes on Saturday night that you can also manually change potentially or with an app, and invite the musicians and the poets of the neighborhood. This is open mic. Let's do a poetry reading. Limited, certain day of the night, certain night, and it forces everyone to create a program. And, that is the Poets Corner. So the malleability, the transformability, the fantastic flexibility of smart lighting from a kind of theater of life point of view, I just think it's magnificent, and we can trial these things.
Well, this seems like a good time to end the discussion, which has been wonderful. A big thanks to you both for joining me today, and thank you for listening. You can listen to us on our website or share on LinkedIn.